So we'll be recording the call, transcribing it, and sharing on Appropedia. And today's call is going to be about examining the potential for open in climate communication lessons from the Wikimedia movement. And we're going to have Alex Stinson facilitating the call. And then Ruby is going to be presenting, Ruby Damenshie-Brown is going to be presenting part of it. You can follow the agenda and take notes in this Google Doc that we've shared on the Zoom chat. And please introduce yourself in the introduction section, and remember to leave your email if you're interested in receiving further information about future calls in the future. You can also use the Zoom chat for comments and technical difficulties if you have any. Of course, a reminder that please mute yourself if you are not speaking. And we also want to acknowledge that we're still in a pandemic and amid compounding crisis, including the climate crisis, which is the main topic and subject of this calls. So everyone is experiencing this differently. So please let's be kind and caring. And why these calls? We have been doing this call since last year because we wanted to better understand how the open movement can respond meaningful to the climate crisis. This is our season 2 of Open Climate Calls, and you're all welcome to this one. We had plans to stir things up a bit, but we have been sort of like wrapped up in the moment right now. But you can read more about past calls on our wiki, which we're going to share in a moment in the chat. And we've written a bit of some pieces. So hopefully Ruby should be here, but Alex, do you want to go ahead and get started?
Yeah, I can get started, and Ruby hopefully will be here in a moment. I'll keep an eye on my Slack, and we'll make sure she gets in the room. So I am going to be sharing a window, and how does that look? Are we good?
Looks good.
Excellent. So we're talking about Wikimedia today, and Wikipedia. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Alex Stinson. I'm a senior program strategist at the Wikimedia Foundation, and I am responsible for thinking about how we scale our outreach through what's called topics for impact in the Wikimedia movement. So topics that have broad public need and interest, and kind of when platform like Wikipedia covers it, it's important for the public. And so, of course, climate change is high on that priority list. And my colleague Ruby, who's our organizing fellow for this campaign, should be here for a campaign we're running, should be here in a moment. And I'll introduce her when she arrives. Why are we talking about Wikipedia? Wikipedia has about 20 billion page views a month across its 300 languages or so. There is a lot of public attention and knowledge seeking happening on Wikipedia. It's also probably, for those of you who've been around the open movement for a while, one of the biggest kind of platforms for like demonstrating the value of open. This is both a good and bad thing. Wikipedia is not like the perfect open set of tools, but at the same time, it kind of models and puts pressure on other folks to think about like what are the open tactics that we can learn from, especially when platforms like Wikipedia are so impactful. So we're talking about Wikipedia because it's big, it's powerful, it's useful when we think about open climate. And we also have, as the Wikimedia movement, so Wikimedia is the nonprofit behind Wikipedia that supports the servers, et cetera. But it's also there's a movement. There are many organizations. We have about 200 organizations around the world that are focused on Wikimedia. And we put together a strategy a few years back that talks about the kind of potential for the Wikimedia movement to be aligned. So we had 10 points recommendations, and one of them was align with sustainability. And this comes in 3 parts. Improving content about environmental sustainability, creating partnerships with institutions that can do the open tactics and practices. That's why I'm here, to advance the mission of the movement, which is create a sum of all human knowledge available to everyone in their own language. And also efforts to reduce our carbon footprint as a movement. And so I'm mostly going to focus on this first part and kind of describe what I've seen as the scale of this work so far. Sorry, I'm hoping Ruby can find her way in. Evelyn, do you think you could email her?
I shared the Zoom link with her on Telegram. Yeah.
Cool. So what do we know about this content? Well, there's about 3,703 articles as of yesterday on English Wikipedia that have explicit scope related to climate change. And we've been we've tracked that as a community on English language Wikipedia. These 3,703 articles are just on English. There's also another 25,000 or so others on other languages. There are 7 other language Wikipedias that are organizing what we call wiki projects, like this one. So Wiki Project Climate Change and Cambio Climatico, where our communities are actively trying to curate this knowledge and figure out how it works. And then we also have a community group forming called Wikimedians for Sustainable Development that has been able, pretty effective. Oh, cool. Ruby said she should be arriving soon. Has been pretty effective at organizing our interest in these topics. Notice how our community has, Ruby got signed in through my account. Zoom. Great to have you, Ruby. I'm just starting. Notice how our community is organizing around sustainable development and sustainability. This is a broader umbrella of topics, but climate change is useful because we can quantify it. What can we quantify? Like I said, there's about 25,000 odd Wikipedia articles that are explicitly about climate change of some sort. And we get about 324 million page views to just those 25,000 articles annually. Put that in perspective, we have like 30 million Wikipedia articles in total. So this is a very small segment of the Wikipedia articles, but it's having this outsized impact. And as far as I can tell, like maybe NASA has more page views against this against climate content, but I don't think there's any other like singular source of high kind of impact climate content. And it's not just those articles, right? Like every time climate change is mentioned in another Wikipedia page, that has a chance to communicate with the public. And so there's an article about to come out in Bloomberg Green in a few weeks with the next part of the IPCC report that's going to have actually a graph, a computer scientist did a graph of all these connections. Every single time climate change is talked about on any of the Wikipedia pages, this is a communication opportunity. And
sorry, Alex.
Yes.
Just a quick question. Could you just say again what the 41% refers to? I missed that.
Oh, yeah. So of those 324 million page views, 41% are to English and 59% are to other language Wikipedias. This is important to note because normally about half of our page views are to English Wikipedia. So this is actually, so climate change is outsized impact in other languages as well. And in some languages, I theorize, and we don't have this completely evidenced yet, but I theorize that we're probably the only platform that can communicate on most of the climate change adjacent topics in that language, right? So take like Farsi or like some of the less internet like grounded Indic languages, or some of the less internet grounded Indonesian languages. Like we might be the only platform communicating about climate change in this. Yeah, and the numbers are probably larger. This is the stuff I can measure, not the stuff that I can't measure, right? So this is kind of like just the surface. And then if you take every other environmental issue, pollution, biodiversity loss, the kind of impending crisis, public health crisis because of COVID, like all those other things, there are many other pages that Wikipedia is communicating about environmental issues as well. And so this is just something to think about. We're also a good platform to talk about like why open knowledge matters for a public on climate change. We've gotten a lot of earned press in the last couple of years about this like small group of people that kind of maintains English Wikipedia as core content. And I'm trying to diversify that press by talking about like our coverage in other languages. But the reason why it's impactful is, for example, this article about petroleum has about 100,000 page views a month. 2 years ago, when I first encountered this article, it said nothing about climate change in the first 3 paragraphs of the article. It said nothing about oil wars and oil conflict, and it said nothing about petroleum states. These are really important issues when you talk about the emergence of fossil fuels as a kind of conflict driver and environmental crisis issue. And like everyone should know this, right? But it was covered elsewhere in the article, but we know that something like 70–80% of readers stop in the lead. And when Wikipedia is like kind of picked up and put in other places like Google or YouTube or whatever, it only takes the introduction. And so there's a real opportunity here, not just, like I said, this is a climate explicit article, but anything affected by climate change, we could be doing this. We also know that we're a powerful disseminator of some disinformation as well. So the BBC recently kind of did an investigation of just the articles about climate change, the concept climate change, in about 70 languages. And they found 10, 15 examples of disinformation. And then our community dug even deeper, and they found 51 examples of either climate denial, disinformation, or climate delay. So knowledge that is being transmitted in order to make people doubt that humans can act on climate change. And this is just on that main article. I'm trying to get some researchers now to look at other climate disinformation in other languages, but we have 300 languages that cover the various topics. And so there's a real opportunity here. Seeing this opportunity, I used a partnership we had with UN Human Rights, and that's now emerging with UN Environmental Program, to run a campaign to think about this set of issues from the perspective of the human impacts. And it's called Wiki for Human Rights. And the kind of core of this call to action, Ruby's going to talk about how this affects our community building in a second. The core of this call to action is the right to a healthy environment, the recently acknowledged human right that the UN Human Rights Council just acknowledged as a universal human right. And why is this like human perspective important? Well, first, a lot of people, when they think climate change, they think climate science. And as we've been talking about in these open climate conversations, like the more important stuff is like adaptation, decision, human impacts, like these things that allow people to facilitate change in society with knowledge, right? And so when we frame it as a human rights story, we frame it about future generations. We also frame it around the like things that affect us in every corner of the world, right? So whether it's water access, whether it's, you know, food instability and food system crisis, whether it's like the destruction of biodiversity, we can do a call to action on these topics that invites people and creates community and participation. And it's been really effective. So these are some examples of activities that have been happening in the Philippines and our community in Uganda that's from South Sudan. So they're actually, a lot of them are displaced people from South Sudan who are now living in Uganda and organizing. But we've also seen effective outreach to experts. And why does this matter? Well, we're a global movement and we're missing a lot of contributors from the global South. And so sustainability and climate change are actually really powerful topics because they're relevant and timely. And what I'm going to do is hand over to Ruby to kind of talk about like how we're thinking about that community building perspective in the work we've been doing with Wiki for Human Rights.
Thank you so much, Alex. I would wish that you continue to share your screen. You just use the same screen sharing. Okay, so handling the community has been an exciting one since the start of the event. And so one of the things that I did when I started the campaign, start coordinating the campaign, was to gather feedback from past organizers and see where the pain points are, where we can improve this time. And so this time I could see that there has been some sort of improvements and some sort of things that have been happening with the campaign, trying to bring new audiences, trying to reach new community groups to organize events. And so next slide, please. So part of what we've been doing so far has been to bring people together. And how have we done that? We've done, next slide, please. We've done that by coordinating various regional groups. And so if you can, as you can see on the screen, we organize general office hours, we organize specific workshops, specific virtual office hours for the regions. We had the Africa region, Asia region, and Arabic region. And these was very important. And I say that it's very important because it makes people feel at home. It brings a sense of belonging. It brings the campaign home to these organizers and sort of like encourage them, inspire them to be part of the campaign. So this is what we've done. And these regional office hours, we understand that our movement is very huge and diverse, and not everyone speaks the same language, not everyone speaks English. And so these regional office hours were tailored to meet specific language needs audiences, and that proved very useful. Next slide. And another thing that we saw that was useful was creating a space for organizers to, talk to us directly one-on-one, because in as much as we wanted to have these regional office hours, bringing people together, trying to understand what, their perspective, or trying to give them a space to ask questions, organizers really had more questions to ask, because we're saying, participate in the campaign, but how do they participate? And these were some of the questions that I got a lot. People wanted to see how they can align and be involved in the campaign. And especially looking at this topic area, which hasn't been something that is common in the past.
Ruby, I think that something is going on with your mic. Can you get closer to it? Because we're losing your voice a little bit.
Okay. Is that okay?
No, try again. Try if you can pull your mic closer.
Wow.
And it might be on your end, because I'm hearing her pretty clearly, or very clearly.
Yeah, I'm hearing her clearly as well.
Okay. Thank you. So I think one of the things, like I was saying, that in as much as we had these regional office hours that were meeting specific organizers from these regions, one of the things that I observed from organizing the campaign is, in as much as we are asking people to organize in the movement, people are not sure how to organize or how to be involved. And so these one-on-one space that we created for them offer the opportunity for us to meet organizers, like specific organizers one-on-one, have a chat. And what I felt happened was that it built their confidence, it got their questions resolved, it got their doubts resolved, and it also provided the opportunity for their capacity to be built in terms of, for instance, people want to participate, but they don't know how to apply for funding. And so these were some of the things that we tried to take them through: how to apply for funding to organize the event, how to even work with partners in their region to participate in their event or support their local event. And we've seen amazing partnership happening in some of the communities that we try to coach, or we've seen activities happening already. And I felt that this was a very good thing that we did as part of the event. Next slide, please. So another amazing thing that happened is that we tried to connect with this partner. This partner is the Youth Climate Council, Ghana. So this is just for the Ghana region, and they were excited about the campaign because it's sort of aligned with their interest, because they are more into climate change and they have a network of climate activists across Ghana. And so looking at environment and documenting environmental topic, they felt like, why not we come together and build the capacity of their youth to be able to, contribute their passion, like direct some of their passion to contributing to Wikipedia, and they getting that skills of contributing to Wikipedia sort of empower them to be able to do so. And so this is one of the exciting partnerships that we've had so far, and it's been great. Next slide. So we've seen a lot of community events happening, and one of the things that I've seen, the difference that I've seen is that communities that participated last year feel much more confident to do it on their own this time. So they didn't have to be bothering us so much, and they have already gone ahead to start organizing their events and tweeting it. So these are tweets from Twitter, from the various events that are happening in Nigeria and Sudan, but we're also anticipating a lot of events happening across different parts of Africa. We're anticipating in CE region, and Asia and Arabic community are also going to be unfolding in the coming months. So this is sort of like inspiring to see community members bring together people to document or tell the story. And I think this is something that is very important, needs to be encouraged, because most of the time we've entered the movement or Wikimedia movement thinking about biographies, or maybe writing about specific things that are more direct, like writing about festivals. We know this is the name of the festival we're writing. But when it comes to environmental topics, the topics are sort of broad. We don't know where to start from. So this is a very great opportunity to sort of get community to start thinking outside the box of the usual thing that we used to know, usual biographies that we used to write, to start thinking about topics that are very impactful, topics that are very critical, especially in today where we are now. Next slide, please. So there's going to be lunch events webinar, which we want to invite all of you. It's happening on the 14th April. And then there's going to be an Earth Day workshop, especially if you're new comer. We encourage you to be at the Earth Day workshop. We'll be showing you how to contribute to Wikipedia, building your capacity and all that. And I think I would say that this campaign, it's a very great and inspiring one to me, especially because prior to my joining when I first got this role, I was asking myself, I'm not an environmentalist. I know little about climate change. I have no idea what it is. How am I going to do it? Do I need to be an expert? But having been on this project for the past month, I see how relevant this is to all of us. And I now understand better the environmental issues that surround us, issues about climate change that surrounds us. I now understand how connected they are to my everyday life. And even talking about gender and climate change, I didn't even see the connection, but I now appreciate it so much, because when I look at the place where I'm coming from, I realize that climate change has really had an impact on us greatly, because for instance, if there's shortage of water, people are not getting water to drink. I realize that more women from my region tend to suffer more, because women are seen as people that take care of homes, people that are supposed to make sure that the home is comfortable. And so if there's no water in the house, what is going to happen? More women will have to travel miles to go and get water, which is it's not a very pleasant thing. And so climate change is everything to us. Environmental issues are everyday happening that we need to know. We need to understand how connected they are to our everyday life. And I think this campaign is bringing that connection to in as much as we want to document on Wikipedia, people don't know how to do that, what to document. But as we run the campaign, we are bringing it more closer to people. We are getting people to understand how common it is, that how related the topic it is to our everyday life. Sorry. So basically, yeah. Next slide. So I'll hand it over to Alex.
Yeah, what we wanted to do is have a discussion on like how open and how like open climate and like what we've been describing with the Wikimedia movement can kind of help us think about, you know, space to empower local communities, right? Like open is a vehicle for like not only knowledge dissemination and action, but it's actually like creating spaces for people. And so we wanted to kind of like spend some time thinking about that. We wanted to spend some time asking the question, like, how do we build these communities' capacity to work in the open on these topics? It's really like climate change and human rights matter every day, right? But kind of bringing people to the cognitive place to like ask these questions requires work. Right, it requires community building and support and that kind of stuff. And then kind of thinking too, and this is like the larger question of these open climate calls, like how do we attract new audiences to the open movement and align them to their interests? And I think through an angle like the campaign we're doing. So we wanted to create some space for, I guess, Q&A, and Evelyn, I don't know how you want to structure this. We could do some Q&A, or we could like go into breakout rooms and discuss this a bit more.
Yeah, maybe let's take 3 questions if there are any questions, and then we can go into the breakout rooms, be there for 10 minutes or so, or 15 minutes, time allowing, and then we'll come back to the main room. So if anyone has a question, you can either unmute yourself or write it on the side chat. So only 3 questions. So
I have a question. I think Ruby might be the best to answer. What do you expect to be the process of transformation for Wikipedians when they undergo these activities? Like, what are the changes in their attitudes towards climate change, etc.? Because I'm really interested in seeing what you have found.
Okay, so I think from my perspective, I think that environmental issue is becoming like the thing of the day. People are like keen on understanding how it's connected to them, how it's connected to human rights, even for example. So I think community members are very much keen to learn, and most community members I see are not necessarily experts. And most of these topics have been seen as topics that are related to experts, and people feel like, oh, how this is for an expert. But what we're trying to do is to say that you don't need to be an expert to be part, and this is what the community is embracing, and to know that they don't need to be an expert to document climate information. It's enlightening. It's something that is exciting to them, and they want to learn how to do it and do it right. So that is what a campaign has been seeking to do, to help people to understand how to contribute to climate change information on Wikipedia, because this is not like the normal biographies that we've been writing, like starting a biography article, and we're looking at even adding sessions to existing articles that people already know, people are already looking out for. So you don't need to be an expert, but the more that community reads about these topics, they tend to understand how connected they are to the normal topics or things that they've been reading on Wikipedia, and be able to incorporate that. So I think the community is really embracing it and are excited. They want to participate.
I think too, like something to remember about the Wikimedia movement is a lot of folks showed up to do either language or cultural preservation. Like that's like why they're participating. And so telling them like language and cultural preservation have a place in this climate conversation, these environmental conversations, that's like really like a value, has been interesting. We're kind of seeing that dynamic play out. We're also seeing, so one of the problems we have in the movement is that newcomers often get pushed back when they work on like marginalized topics, right? So Ruby was saying like a lot of communities like write biographies. Well, one of the problems with biographies, it's very hard to determine if they like are in scope of Wikipedia, and we call this notable, or not as a newcomer. It's kind of a hard skill to learn. Whereas these climate issues, like the documentation is just prolific, right? And so it's much easier to zoom someone in on an action that is like invitational, and you can do research and you can learn and that kind of stuff without like running into conflict in the community, which I think is like part of the reason I'm so interested in supporting it as a practice as well. So I think we have two hands.
Sean Noe, I'm butchering your name a little bit. Go ahead.
That's okay. It's pronounced Jean Noé. So hi, everybody. Really nice to join you today. I got the chance to connect with Emilio a few weeks ago, so I'm really glad just to be joining in. I guess what comes to mind here, and I've been active in the open data community for, I don't know, over a decade and whatnot, so I'm really excited to connect with you all on the climate. I guess the question that comes to mind is, looking at this from an environmental justice perspective and kind of leveraging and kind of using the type of infrastructure that you're talking about to collect data, there seems to be a kind of a training component around sense making related to different types of environmental justice data. And so if we look at, public health, pollution, environmental type of data, I guess I'm just wondering, how do we kind of collectively as a movement kind of train ourselves to recognize, the impact of different types of environmental events related to the climate emergency on like sensitive populations, different types of burdens, different types of effects. So I think that's, I think we're just like in the human rights space, and I'm thinking of other initiatives in like in Mexico, for example, being able to locate and document missing persons. There was a whole vocabulary that had to be developed in order to be able to kind of empower people to contribute kind of actively to the documentation of these types of human rights violations. So I'm just wondering, what's the process to do that? How do we empower ourselves and kind of broaden and scale the community to be able to contribute in a meaningful way, to be able to identify the impact on sensitive populations, pollution burdens, and environmental effects? Is there a strategy around that?
So I'll take a first pass at this, and you should talk about it in the breakout rooms when we get into it in a second. One of the tactics I've been deploying is kind of zooming people in on geography and environmental space articles that have a lot of page views on Wikipedia. So like the biggest cities in Nigeria, if you look at these articles, they're like pretty crappy, like Lagos and the political capital. I'm forgetting the city at the moment. Like those articles are very big and very well covered, but like you just go like Port Harcourt, right, which is a center for like oil export out of Nigeria and exploration. That article on Wikipedia is crappy. It's just not like a full article. And so these environmental issues, like when people learn about that city, they learn about the history, they learn about a little bit of geography and population, who settled there, right? But they could also be learning about these environmental issues and the justice issues associated with the economy of that place. And so like a lot of the things I've been trying to get communities to think about is like, how do we make sense of place? How do we make sense of culture? How do we make sense of geography in light of these things in a way that like exposes a public to the crisis, right? Just like the petroleum article like makes you think about the social dynamics of like, petrol conflict, right? Because of that edit I made. How do we pick something like, a place affected by sea level rise or pollution or whatever, and make sure that like that place also describes that context? Because I think like the broader public is often not asking that question. Like if I go on, vacation to Port or meeting in Port Houghton, like, am I thinking about air pollution in the city? Am I thinking about this? And like for environmentalists, we think about it all the time, right? Like that is like where we ask questions. But I think for the general public, that connection isn't there. And so I think like a broad public platform like Wikipedia is a good vehicle for this. Now, the larger question of like, how do we do this in other open spaces? I think that's a great breakout room question. Ruby, did you have anything else to add to that too?
No.
Well, maybe Karen? No?
Hi, I'm Karin. I dropped off just for a bit, Alex, unfortunately, in the middle of your presentation, so I'm not sure whether this was covered, but something I'm curious about is Wikipedia's quest for neutrality and how you deal with that around this. Because there is, you could talk about things that say some of these things are factual, but then there is also a big part of society that talks about interpretation, and there's environmental monitoring, and there is modeling, and some of these things are predictions or risks. How do you deal with that neutrality requirement when it comes to issues of climate and also social and climate justice?
So we have discussions about this all the time in the Wikimedia Movement. When we say neutrality, we mean neutral point of view, which is equal balance of weight of the expert reputable opinions on a topic. And with the environmental crisis, like all of the consensus and sense-making institutions in the world have basically said, yeah, this is the issue. Yeah, this is real. Like, let's do evidence-based research for these things. And so I think like the problem of neutrality, like there's a problem of weight within a Wikipedia article. Like you might not want the whole article, like Port Houghton, I'll keep coming back to that because it's a important geography. Like you might not want the whole article to be about environmental issues, but no one's going to object within the Wikipedia community to the citations there, right? No one's going to object to that coverage because it's just like there's dozens of academics. And I think covering this, and particularly for our communities in Global South, like the IPCC and others are often like, well, there's no research from these places, right? And in fact, when you dig deeper, like local universities and local press are often covering these topics. And so it's a real like act of knowledge equity for our communities to like gather those sources and represent them somewhere that's like not part of those consensus making institutions. I'm wondering, Ruby, like have you thought about this kind of source and neutrality issue?
So this is a big topic, and I think what Alex has just said is, I think I would go with that. And talking about neutrality, like Alex mentioned, we're talking about the neutral point of view. So it's a very complicated subject, but I think maybe we can discuss that. We can discuss that during the breakout room. I don't really have much to say on that topic, but apart from what Alex has said, I just don't want to be repeating stuff. Yeah.
And I want to apologize. I had a brain fart and was saying Port Houghton instead of Port Harcourt. That's what I meant, and I really want to apologize for anyone who like my geography and my misstatement. But yeah, I think it's this question of like, are there sources? Where are the sources? How do we gather them? And for Wikipedia, we don't try to be neutral in the like political neutrality sense. We try to be neutral in the like all of the relevant viewpoint sense. And so no one's denying at the moment that environmental perspectives are real in the movement, which is like, I think very different in like other like more political realms. And you sometimes see like a balance towards like delay evidence in Wikipedia or like injustice evidence. So like human overpopulation is a particularly like terrible group of scholarship, right? Because it has these like, really racist biases and stuff against it. But it's like there's a huge body of literature on it that just is well cited on Wikipedia, and it's hard to like remove it entirely. But there's a real great way to kind of like soften it by bringing the criticisms of that perspective up.
Great. I think that. Sorry, Alex. I thought you were done.
Oh, I am. I just noticed Anna put up a hand. So
yeah, but we don't have any more time for questions because otherwise we're not going to have time for the breakout rooms. So maybe if we have a little bit of time left, we'll go back. It is that now we're going to be separated into breakout rooms. We'll have around 10 minutes to have a conversation there. And the questions are, you can find them on the Google Docs node. And the idea is that you will have like around 1 minute or so of silently writing your ideas and then a group conversation in the breakout rooms. And we'll be back here at 55. And if we have time, we'll take Anna's question. Sorry about that, Anna.
No worries.
Okay, I'm gonna open all the rooms, and if you have any issues, let me know and I will get you somewhere.
Super Zoom. Do you hear me?
Do we want me to finish it then, Evelyn? Is that...
If you don't mind, I think that we are all back to the main room now, unless Anna wants to pose her question now.
Yeah, we kind of started discussing it a little bit. I was just saying, because I come from like I'm a theoretical physicist, so I come from a very like process of science oriented mindset. And I was just wondering whether you think about Wikipedia rather as a platform that presents the end result of that process of, you know, going through a lot of data and then, you know, arriving at a graph, let's say at the end, or whether you think Wikipedia could be made more flexible to really present that process that I was just referring to.
Yeah, I think this is like a lot of people think of Wikipedia as like a fact repository, and I don't think that's quite a fair reflection of like how the community processes knowledge. What's more common is that we document like the like for and against positions of things and like how people come to disagree on issues and like the various like perspectives you could have. And so if you read a lot of the like more well-developed articles, they'll have a lot of different angles kind of contained within. And, you know, Evelyn organizes in the Latin American community for Wikimedia, and she's often telling me like, what if every Wikipedia article had like a gender perspective in it, right? What if we were like taking these like big topics and asking what's the gender critical angle on it? And part of the reason I like using human rights as a vehicle for community building is because it allows us to say gender, human rights, like privacy, humanitarian issues, Like all of these things that are like perspectives that are more at the justice intersection with the environmental issues can like exist within these conversations, right? And we need to document them as such, and we need to draw those connections. And so I'm thinking a lot of what of the training and capacity build we're doing is like bridging the topics and the issues. And like Ruby's like revelation that like gender is connected to climate change is like the revelation I want my organizers to have and then transmit to their participants, right? Is like that process of like, oh, this is not just a science thing. This is like a whole human existence thing. And we need to like reconcile with that. And that's transformative because then you can deal with like cultural heritage preservation or language preservation or gender rights or whatever in your own way in the open content.
Great. I think that we're at the top of the hour. So thanks everyone for joining the meeting, and thanks Ruby and Alex for facilitating the conversation. And watch out all our spaces in order to learn more. And if you didn't sign up for receiving more information, remember to leave your email there and visit the Open Climate on Appropedia to receive the write-up for this meeting. See you all.